So, did your strategy change over time at all? Like you had the weekly free newsletter and then the 20 big reports. As you became more successful, were there any changes, or did you invest anything in terms of hiring help or anything like that?
I mean, I'm still pretty small. Like right now, it's about ARR of 180 or 190,000. So I can't really hire anybody. The strategy hasn't changed materially. I feel like I did adopt some of the methods of other Substacks that they use these paywalls halfway down. And I became, for some period, very aggressive in just sending out emails that were cut off and pushing people to subscribe. I think that creates a really bad experience for free subscribers, and I'm probably abused them a little bit, thinking that I'll get free subscribers anyway. So I became a lot more aggressive in conversions, but nothing really changed. I suppose one thing that I did change was that I took away the free trials for 1 year. I stopped growing for 1 year. The publications completely stopped growing for 1 year.
When you stopped growing when you took away the free trials.
And I realized, just like you said, like people need to understand the value of what you're offering them, right? Something needs to be free. I reinserted the free trials, and then I grew 40% per year again.
Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. Michael Fritzell doesn't fit the typical profile of a newsletter writer. Before launching Asian Century Stocks, he spent 15 years inside the machinery of global finance, working in investment banking, buy-side firms, and eventually managing money for a wealthy family in Singapore. A Swedish native who studied Chinese at Peking University, Michael built a career analyzing overlooked equities across China and Southeast Asia. When he struck out on his own to launch the Asian Century Stocks newsletter in 2021, he wasn't experimenting with a side hustle. He was walking away from a traditional finance track to build a niche media business focused on Asian stocks that most Western investors ignore. Launched on Substack and now operating independently, Asian Century Stocks sells in-depth 40 to 60 page research reports to paying subscribers, many of whom are professional investors accustomed to paying banks tens of thousands of dollars a year for comparable research. Michael positioned himself as a bridge between local Asian markets and global capital, offering deeply reported, independent analysis without the conflicts that often accompany sell-side research. In an interview, he explained how he went from anonymous finance professional to six-figure recurring revenue newsletter operator, why he ultimately left Substack for Ghost, and what it takes to monetize serious financial research in a tightly regulated industry. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, let's jump into the interview. Hey, Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So I am having you on here because you write this amazing newsletter that you've been running for several years. It's been really successful. You monetize it mainly through paid subscriptions, but I think also maybe some sponsorships as well. We'll get to that in a little while. It's called Asian Century Stocks. That's the name of it?
That's right. Yeah. It's yeah.
Yeah, so
That's
like
right.
let's talk about kind of like the origin of it. I usually go to someone's LinkedIn to kind of do some research on them, but you actually don't have much information on your LinkedIn profile that I could see. But I was kind of reading, piecing together from various online bios of yours that I could find. It seems like you worked. You graduated with like a degree in like finance or economics, and then you worked in like a family office or something like that. Tell me a little bit about your background prior to launching this newsletter.
Sure. I mean, so the reason why I don't provide much information on LinkedIn is because of regulatory reasons. I don't want to make it seem like I'm a regulated financial analyst. For that, you need to have a financial advisor's license. So I'm really running a media business right now. It is focused on Asian equities, but it is from a very factual point of view, without having a license to advise people to buy and sell. So that's why I'm a little bit secretive. But my background is in finance. I spent 15 years in investment banking and different buy-side firms. That is, people buying and selling stocks on behalf of unit holders of funds. Or I also worked for a wealthy family in Singapore, managing their money. So I have a background as a money manager. I can also tell you a bit about my long-term background. I'm European. I was born in Switzerland. I grew up in Sweden, and my parents are Swedish. So I have this Swedish background, and I went into finance after university in the UK. Worked for an investment bank, and ended up in Asia. I had studied Chinese, and I got a job in Shanghai working for a fund. So I spent almost 4 years in China, working for this emerging market fund. I was on the ground being an analyst, looking for investment ideas in China. And at that time, it was quite early on. I was one of the very few people who invested in the local market. Um, so that gave me kind of a unique background. And after 4 years of being in China, I was recruited to a wealthy family in Singapore, managing their money. And yeah, that's really my background. I had a few more jobs, but yeah, sorry.
Well, how did you said you speak Mandarin?
I do speak Mandarin. Yeah, I
Yeah,
spent 1 year.
how did you come to speak Mandarin?
I spent 1 year at Peking University, which is one of the top institutions in China, and I lived and breathed Chinese at that time. I think during that year, I spent almost the full year speaking nothing but Chinese, and at the end of it, I was just so immersed in the language that I started dreaming in Chinese, and almost completely operating on a local level. I wouldn't say I'm as good anymore, but at that time, working in China, I used to have meetings completely in Chinese, and um, it was a unique experience. It was like a crash course in emerging market investing. That was many years ago. I mean, I moved to Singapore 2014, so it's already been 12 years outside of China.
And the investment firm that hired you or had you in China, was that a Western investment firm that needed like a someone who spoke the local language, and also for like clients that wanted to buy, stocks and assets in, Asia, that you would be kind of like the man on the ground there? Is that
Why they hired me is a big question, because they could easily just hire a local, right? But it was Luxembourg-based fund, or the two funds to be more specific, and then we started a third fund, which was A shares, like local stocks only. But yeah, they had a Chinese employee as well, and then they had me, perhaps as a bit of a bridge. And the clients, I think they do want to see people who speak, who they can relate to. So perhaps that was partly my role. Um, so yeah.
and we're getting way outside of my expertise here, but like when you say a fund, was it like a hedge fund, a VC fund? Like what were you? Who were the clients, and what were you specifically doing for them?
So the fund was a mutual fund, both of them, and they gave pretty much access to equities in Asia. Now, at the time, ETFs, they weren't as popular, so it wasn't as easy to get access. Certainly not to the Asia market, which is locally listed Chinese equities. And we invested in publicly listed companies. So this was stocks listed in the stock exchange in Hong Kong, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and these were typically larger companies. We would only be a minority shareholder, and we would move in and out of these stocks quite frequently. So my role was really to figure out the value of these companies and see where we should be positioned for the long term.
Yeah, and then like they have like I'm guessing in Asia, like they have their own stock exchanges for companies that are based there.
Yeah, there are stock exchanges in every country, and the, you know even after moving out of China, I spent 12 years in Singapore. A lot of that time I spent in Southeast Asia, and these markets, they typically have maybe 500 to 800,000 companies listed for each country. Quite illiquid. Uh, I mean, these markets are very niche, and it also speaks to my own, I wouldn't say success, but the niche that I have is because nobody else really cares about these stocks. These are locally listed stocks that are just not very popular.
Yeah, are they kind of like the U.S. equivalent of like penny stocks and stuff like that?
If you look at the valuations of some of the companies, for example, I own shares in this largest chocolate producer in Indonesia. The valuation of the company is tiny. It's like less than $300 million. That's almost like a penny stock in the US. But Indonesia is a big country, 280 million people, and they have 40% market share in chocolate in Indonesia. So I think these are blue chips. They're just not highly valued, and just people don't really pay attention to them.
Yeah. And then, so you went in 2014, you moved to Singapore to work for a family office. So then did
Mm.
that give you exposure to like a broader range of different kinds of assets and stuff like that? Like beyond just stocks, like real estate and other stuff like that?
Yeah, so the family office I worked for, it was a wealthy family from Sweden, actually, where I'm from, and they had about $1 billion in assets in equities, and half of that was in Asia, and most of that money was in Southeast Asia, so countries like Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and again, I was an analyst supporting the person making the decisions, and I would travel to all of these countries and just meet tons of management teams.
Yeah. And so you were building up this, like, obviously, they're probably local finance people who speak the local languages who are familiar with some of these stocks, but like you spoke English, you're a Westerner, you were building up, like, as you said, this like very niche, expertise. When did you, or how did you start getting the idea of that you could basically act as like almost like an analyst slash like almost like a journalist. I don't know if you would use that word to describe yourself or how you would describe yourself, but how did you decide to try to launch like a media company around what you were doing?
So in 2017, I joined this startup hedge fund, and that was a great experience, but it didn't pan out in the end. I spent a few years working as a research analyst for a European fund. Uh, I was based in Singapore, but I was the only person here doing research for them. And I knew there was no upside to it because they didn't have a license in Singapore. I couldn't manage money on my own. Typically, what happens is when you work through the career ladder, you start out as an analyst, and eventually you become a portfolio manager. You manage money you manage an actual fund. And I knew that it was never going to happen. So in 2021, I was inspired by these US based Substacks like the Bear Cave petition and a bunch of others. And I thought, and I saw their success, and I realized if I could just replicate what they've done, almost, exactly what they've done, but for Asian equities, I should have a pretty nice niche. Um, so I took a risk, and in April 2021, I just quit my job and said, I'm going to do this.
So did you have any personal brand online prior to that?
No,
Wow.
nothing.
Okay, so you were starting like 100% from scratch.
It was 100% from scratch, and it was very risky because Singapore is a very expensive place to live. It's a global financial center, and you have high costs on a monthly basis. It took me 2.5 years to reach break even on a cost basis. So it was a big risk, and but I didn't feel too risky because I saw the success that others had had, and my plan was to give it 3 years and reach break even. And now it's been 5 years, and so far so good.
So it was called Asian Century Stocks from the very beginning.
That's right.
And so you launched in 2021 on Substack.
That's right. So it's been almost 5 years now. I should say I was on Twitter. I had maybe 5,000 followers. Um, Twitter is like this place where fund managers hang out, finance people. We share ideas. We talk about stocks, and I think people knew me, but I was anonymous, and I had no, like people didn't know about me or why they should follow me. So I had to do it from scratch, and but then again, I felt like Substack was really supportive. They had all these videos on YouTube where they described how you should approach building your Substack. So there was a lot of support, and copying a business model is a lot easier than innovating from the start.
And when you first started, what was the cadence you were publishing at, and what kind of content were you creating?
I pretty much copied Edwin Dorsey's approach. He writes a Substack called The Bear Cave, and every week he would send out something to the free list with a bunch of links and also teasers to the paid content. And just like what he did, I had these deep dives, which would be maybe 40, 50, 60 page reports on individual companies. And Asia is not like the US where you can find information on any company. Like there's just a scarcity of information. So when I published one report, this will be completely new to the internet. Like you would not find anything like this in the public sphere. So these deep dives were, I think, were the cornerstone of my offering. And I would offer 20 such reports per year for a cost of initially, I think it was like $290 per year.
And those were fully behind the paywall?
Yeah.
And how often were, so you 28, so roughly slightly less than twice a month?
Yeah, exactly.
Is basically, yeah. So you put out 2 of those 40-page reports. That's a pretty meaty report. And then the free newsletter, how often were you sending that?
Weekly. So just a bunch of links. I mean, the free stuff was very, cursory. It's something that I put together in a few hours.
Yeah, so like I guess you only had 5,000 followers on Twitter. The big thing that you were creating was behind a paywall, so of course it doesn't get shared as efficiently as something that's free. And then the free content you were creating was just roundups of links. So how did people start discovering you? What were like some of those initial breakthrough points where you felt like the brand was like starting to gain traction?
Well, I had a launch post and that was free. So some people paid attention to that. I also think that Substack was a lot less competitive back then. Maybe you felt that as well. Like there just weren't that many people doing what I did back then. Also, the format and everything I did, I wrote my deep dives in PowerPoint formats, and they looked quite distinctive, quite different. So perhaps that made a bit of a splash. I felt at the beginning that Substack was like YouTube 2008. You could join the platform and grow with it, and hopefully just ride its popularity. So I think that pretty much worked out as I expected. And also it was easier back then to get access to podcasts. So I went on a few podcasts. I did cross promotions with the other newsletters. So growth was very rapid in the first year. Maybe I had like 60,000 in ARR after 1 year. And after that, growth slowed down. But it was fairly smooth, I would say.
And who did you notice as you were seeing these email addresses come in? Like who was signing up for this? Like were these just retail traders, or were you seeing like email addresses at like big banks or regulators or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of professionals, and right now, I don't recall what it was like back then, but now maybe like 40% are professionals. So I'm really competing with banks here. Like bank, they produce their own research. They have a different business model because banks, they want you to buy and sell shares through them. So they will take a commission, and the research they send to their clients. If you only want access to their research, maybe you pay 20,000 per year or 50,000 per year US dollars. So very expensive. And whereas I charge 350, which is, I think, quite disruptive. Also, I can speak freely because I don't have any relationships with companies, or at least not many relationships. So I'm completely honest with everything I write, and I'm able to talk about negatives as well as positives. So I think people on the buy side, they appreciate that, whereas retail investors, they think it's too expensive. Like they compare the subscription to Netflix and they think, why should I pay in excess of what I might pay for Wall Street Journal? So inevitably, you end up with subscribers who have at least a few $1 million of liquid assets.
Mm-hmm. And so, like you mentioned that, like being early somewhat to Substack, what did you notice in terms of like what Substack was doing for you in terms of helping you grow your audience? Like I read a piece that you wrote last week because you just left Substack for Ghost. You got tapped by the Substack Pro program, right?
Oh, well, I didn't get an advance. So I think if I'm not mistaken, Pro is the one where they give you an advance for staying on for moving over to Substack. So I didn't get that, but I did win this fellowship, which I think they ran for 1 or 2 years. I was one of the 12 people who were chosen to get training from Substack. I
Oh,
guess
you didn't get a okay.
yeah. So, I got a small amount of money, but also training. They gave me a mentor in yeah in Bill Bishop, who was one of the first authors on Substack. So they were extremely helpful, trying to help me to grow. They put us in contact with their internal team that does like community building. So yeah, it was great, and I feel like Substack, what they do so well is that they help you connect with others. So you can borrow each other's audiences, you can help each other. Otherwise, writing can be a very lonely job, and I think Substack, what they done so well is that they bring you together, and you feel like you kind of you have like almost like a team, even though you're working alone.
So like what features in Substack help drive you audience? Like was it like the recommendations feature where you're using Substack notes?
So yeah, I think Substack, their approach, they changed a little bit. Perhaps in 2022 they were forced to cut down on all these extras that they provided. Like they had this tight connection with authors, and they fired quite a few people, I think, and they moved towards just becoming more of a platform. Um, in terms of like the free subscriber growth, the recommendations feature really helped. They push people to subscribe to quite a few Substacks at the same time. So if you subscribe to mine, you'll be nudged to subscribe to maybe 5 others, and that helped with the free growth. But in terms of the paid growth, I don't think it really made a difference. In fact, I grew much faster before the recommendations feature than after. So it's hard to say. Like if you look at their statistics, they make the case that Substack helps. They help you gain subscribers because the credit cards are saved in the system and it's easy to subscribe, and there's definitely that effect. But it's impossible to know how much of your growth comes from Substack and how much of it is just people being on Substack but actually finding you on Twitter, for example. So it's hard to say, but I think, would I have been as successful just starting a blog on WordPress? Probably not. I feel like, part of the success must have been thanks to Substack.
So did your strategy change over time at all? Like you had the weekly free newsletter and then the 20 big reports. As you became more successful, were there any changes, or did you invest anything in terms of hiring help or anything like that?
I mean, I'm still pretty small. Like right now, it's about ARR of 180 or 190,000. So I can't really hire anybody. The strategy hasn't changed materially. I feel like I did adopt some of the methods of other Substacks that they use these paywalls halfway down. And I became, for some period, very aggressive in just sending out emails that were cut off and pushing people to subscribe. I think that creates a really bad experience for free subscribers, and I probably abused them a little bit, thinking that I'll get free subscribers anyway. So I became a lot more aggressive in conversions, but nothing really changed. I suppose one thing that I did change was that I took away the free trials for 1 year. I stopped growing for 1 year. The publications completely stopped growing for 1 year.
When
And
you stopped growing when you took away the free trials.
I realized, just like you said, like people need to understand the value of what you're offering them, right? Something needs to be free. So that's I reinserted the free trials, and then I grew 30-40% per year again.
So you, just for context of what you're talking about, so you said that you started to send out the like partial free version. So Substack allows you to send out a version of your paid newsletter to your free list, but it has a cutoff with the paywall. and some people aggressively do this, and it creates like you could argue, a bad user experience for the free subscribers because they're just constantly getting hit with like paid content that they can't access. Like that's what you're talking about.
That's right. So I suppose I built up this free list, partly thanks to my own, but partly thanks to Substack, and then I really kind of abused them. And not only did I have paywalls halfway down, I also had videos, and then put the paywall in like 1 minute in. So some people think that's okay, but I can imagine that a lot of people are a little bit annoyed with all the emails they're getting now, and they're all kind of paywalled. So
did you stop doing that?
Well, to be honest, like when I moved to Ghost recently, and since then I've had to rethink a little bit what I do, and that's how I came across you. Actually, I found a compendium of articles of yours on Gumroad, and I read through the whole thing in 1 or 2 days. It was fantastic, just to get inspiration of how I should build up the funnel again. And started from the last few weeks, I'm again starting to provide more value to the free subscribers to create an actual funnel. Because, yeah.
Wow, so you were the one person who bought that Gumroad ebook that I put up there. So you moved to Ghost recently, and I read your piece where you talked about it. You're not the only person who's voiced this complaint, but you were kind of getting annoyed that like Substack was becoming more and more focused on becoming a platform, like a social platform, than it was like serving individual creators, and you felt like you were losing some of your autonomy or your ability to communicate to own your audience, basically.
Yeah, I knew that this was in the works, and I had spoken to the team at Substack about this. And I told them as much, that if they start to introduce, if they stop you from porting your subscribers to other platforms, that creates a lock-in that I don't feel comfortable with. Specifically this iOS payments, which you cannot turn off. It's a bad experience for subscribers, and it's a bad experience for authors. So I felt that it was really one-sided. Because the take rate is really high, 30% plus 10% for Substack. That's hard to take, but also the fact that while you do have their emails, you can, if you work with your subscribers, you can move them over, I suppose, but you can't cancel the subscriptions, to my understanding. So if you do get subscribers via the iOS, you are stuck with them, and potentially you will have to write forever. Now, that made me really nervous, and within a month, I had moved my publication over. Turns out, very few people have received these subscriptions, and I don't know what's going to happen now. It feels like long term they're building this closed platform, a little bit like Medium or maybe Patreon.
I guess so the iOS thing, correct me if I'm wrong, but that came out of, there was a big ruling, I think, with like is it Epic or that video game company, that where the judge ruled that Apple had to open up its payment system so that you could point your payments off of the platform and not have to go through Apple's ecosystem. And around that time, Substack, because before, if you were offering a discount, like you couldn't subscribe through the app because of those iOS rules. And then Substack finally issued the thing so that people who are like browsing through the app, they can become a paid subscriber through the app, but they would have to go through Apple's iOS payments. I got the sense that it was not because Substack was creating user lock-in. It's just that's the way you have to play the game with Apple. Like, I'm guessing they would have rathered it go through Stripe. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this. And then so now users, if they're in the app, they have the option of subscribing to your Substack through the app, but they're going through Apple's ecosystem, and that's separate from your Stripe account, and that's why you can't take them with you if you go somewhere else. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Well, yes. I mean, it happened after this epic ruling took place, but this is only for the US. So in the US right now, if you have the app, you can subscribe via the app, but they also nudge you to subscribe, to click a link onto a browser and subscribe there. So US users are unlikely to subscribe via the app. But my problem is I'm 80% non-US. And for these, at least in theory, what they told us was that these people would have to subscribe via the app. So if they have the app and they click subscribe, it will go through iOS.
But isn't there a setting in the settings where you can say don't allow iOS listings? Really? It's required?
That's what they said. So to be honest, I mean, I'm living in Singapore. Here, I don't see the option to subscribe via the app. So I think the rollout has been a lot slower. Perhaps Substack has had pushback. So maybe I overreacted, to be honest. It hasn't been a thing yet.
So how have you said, how has the migration to Ghost gone? Like, have you been able to port over all your paid subscribers? Because I've heard like sometimes there's been technical problems when people have tried to move off of Substack.
It was fantastic. So I subscribed to Ghost Pro, which is their hosted service, and they did everything for me. So nothing was lost. Everyone was ported over successfully. I think some people were a bit frustrated because there's just less familiarity with the theme that I use, and people, they don't know how to log in. They feel uncomfortable, and also I think depending on which theme you use, people are much less likely to subscribe, to provide their emails. So it's a bit of a challenge, I would say. The paid list is still growing nicely, but the free list is just really not growing for me.
And I've heard that like some people have problems if they are hosting their podcast, like paid podcasts through Substack. But since you don't do a podcast, it was probably a little bit easier for you, because then with the paid podcast, there's like an RSS link and stuff like that. And how do you seamlessly switch that over? But because you were just writing, it probably was easier than someone who was doing a podcast through it. So you haven't had any complaints from paid subscribers that they're not receiving the newsletters or anything like that?
Actually, the open rate, it went up about 10 percentage points. So the delivery has been better. There are some friction. There is a friction with regards to videos. I can't upload them to Ghost. It's just not. They don't support large video uploads. So I'm using Vimeo, and then I embedded the videos into each post. Some people, they prefer to get notifications on the phone. They don't get those anymore. Now they get emails. So there's a whole variety of issues. But depending on who you send to, I mean, some people prefer emails and other people prefer the app. But in my case, a lot of my subscribers are 40, 50 years old. They are pretty serious. They already receive bank research, so they don't mind me having as part of their email inbox. So for me, I think it hasn't been a huge issue so far.
Do you sell sponsorships in this newsletter?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No. So the problem, I mean, my niche is finance is a great niche because people have money to spend, and I think if you look at the publications that do well on Substack, a lot of them are finance publications because people always want to make money. The problem is regulation is very tight. In some countries, you're not allowed to share your portfolio. That would be seen as investment advice. In Singapore, you can, but it's very sensitive. So I forgot what questions you had. But,
so it's just like, I mean, I run a newsletter sponsorship index, and there are tons of finance newsletters that are monetized 100% through sponsorships, but you've decided not to take sponsorships.
Exactly right. So sponsorships are very sensitive. You can do them, but I'd rather not to, because you get into all of these questions of promoting a regulated service without a license and so on. So I only subscribe on rely on subscriptions, which I think is great, and that will remain the case.
So you're just a writer. You don't do podcasts. You said you do video. What are you doing on the video front?
I do short summaries of presentations, and the reason is I make these 60-page presentations. People don't have time, and I also think like this. People are looking for like dopamine hits. They don't really have the patience to read through 30 pages or 30 minutes of long form content. I found that the articles with that are 7 to 12 pages of reading length typically have the most likes on Substack. So I try to optimize for that. These deep dives I have typically have a summary, which takes 5 to 7 minutes to read, and then a video that's ideally also 7 minutes to listen to. So I think everything is moving towards video. It's easier to consume, and it's also engaging. Like I can emphasize certain things that may not be obvious if you read like a long form article.
And the video is embedded behind the paywall.
So right now, I mean, I've changed like the way I'm doing things just in the past few weeks. So now what I'm doing is I have this weekly free newsletter with one article, maybe 1,000 words or 1,500 words. And then I put that on the website for SEO. And in that weekly email, it's just an email, but I also put links to train people to click, which I hope will get them to subscribe eventually. And then I have a teaser of the paid content in that free email. And the paid content is completely behind a paywall. So, and I emphasize that at the top of the email, saying this is for subscribers only, to make people feel like they're getting something exclusive.
So when you look ahead from now, like 2 years from now, what do you want to be doing that you're not doing now? Like, do you ever want to scale this beyond yourself? Could you see yourself like hiring more analysts or someone to produce like better videos for you? What do you want to be doing?
I think I'm going to be doing what I'm doing now. I mean, I'm moving away from Substack. That's a big thing for me. I'm relying less on Substack notes. I'm using it, but I'm finding that the algo doesn't really push me as much as the actual, authors, Substack authors. So instead, I'm moving towards LinkedIn and Substack, and Twitter. So these are the two platforms that finance people use the most. Longer term, I need to move to Bloomberg because they have 400,000 subscribers and they're perfect for my audience. So Bloomberg is this financial terminal.
What do you mean move to Bloomberg?
I mean, have presence on Bloomberg. You can do that through these chat groups, Bloomberg Chat, or you can put your research in the research section of Bloomberg, which is called BRC. So
you can just upload it yourself.
The free research that I've already published, I can just put that on Bloomberg, and then people will find it. So
I didn't know that Bloomberg had like a user-generated content part of its terminal.
Well, not really user-generated, but the research I do is quite serious. So it will definitely qualify, I think, for it will be seen as equivalent to sell-side research, bank research. So I found that SEO has been really helpful for me because I cover stocks that nobody else really cares about, like Philippine seaports or Malaysian auto distributors. And if people search for those names on Google, my website will show up at the top. So if you're into these niche stocks, you will find me on Google. Likewise, if you search for a particular company on Bloomberg and you look for research on it, there's guaranteed almost nothing of value there. So you can really stand out if you have anything to offer.
Do you do
Um,
anything to interact with your audience? Like, do you do any Q&As, subscriber Q&As, like live streams or anything like that?
yeah, I do. I have these. I've had these Q&A. It's been not regularly. For a while I did it monthly. It's a little bit tricky because you should not give personalized financial advice. And if someone mentions a stock and asks, what do you think? Like I can say what I think, but that could be seen as personalized financial advice. I do have a Telegram group, and same there. Like we just share facts, and a lot of people told me that they actually get more value from the Telegram group than the actual writing, which tells you that people, they really value community. And if you can do that, like if you can build a community that's active, I think that's worth so much.
Is a Telegram group for paid subscribers only?
It's technically for my friends, but I do provide links to it to paid subscribers usually.
Well, Michael, those are all the questions I have for you. Where can people find you work online?
They can find me on my website, asiancenturystocks.com. You can also find me on Twitter. Handle is Mike Fritzell with two L's, Fritzell. So yeah, and happy to speak to anyone who's interested in my journey or my strategies.
Awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much.